want to introduce Lisa as I know I'm sort of boring and people don't like the narrative part, but I can't do it otherwise. It's my hermeneutic, my interpretive brain. But when I moved to LA, it was the dark ages for yoga. And it was a little bit of a moment like what Yogananda experienced when there was great suppression. And the FBI had infiltrated our ashram and had virtually gone everywhere in the late 70s because of Jonestown, which of course was a Christian movement, but nonetheless the manic frenzy and fear of cults was pervasive, and the Jewish Defense League, the federal government, the entertainment industry was on an all-out press to make sure that people stayed away from yoga. And partly for good reason. I think many of us saw Wild Wild Country, and there were some really crazy things happening. And nonetheless, yoga continued, sort of under the radar. And then in the 90s, a shift happened. And the shift was that these people that had their bodies colonized by geocities and by code sort of realized that they were going to lose their soul unless they recovered their bodies. And there's a sort of irony that I'll pass on and let Lisa pick up from here, but the irony was that eventually this amazing place that Lisa still represents was sold out to the founders of Ask Jeeves, which was the big search engine back in the day. And then another shift happened. But there were two people in companionship with Lisa and many others, Chuck Miller and Ezrati Mati, who Mati Ezrati, right, who had trained with Pattabhi Joyce and tell me if I got the story wrong, but had come back here and then allied themselves with people such as Lisa. Who else were the early teachers? Jasmine
was there, Brian Kess was there, Robert Spriker was there.
It was an historic moment, and so much of what we have in all of these variegated forms of yoga came out of this nexus that was Yoga Works.
And Shiva Ray came out of it, Sean Korn came out of it,
yeah, big, big movement. And although
Schiffman was there.
Eric Schiffman, that's right, yeah. So I hadn't quite stumbled unknowingly into Yoga Works, but I had gone to the other place in Montana that was, I think, originally there, which was Green Forest Yoga Academy with Anna Forrest, or Forest Yoga Academy. And she had a very, very dramatic story, but it was really all about the recovery of the body. And then word got out that I was, sort of doing some yoga things at LMU, and I got invited to teach at Yoga Works in the early 90s, sort of mid-90s, and out of that group, partly inspired by the outcome and the turnout, and the fact that clearly my style wasn't the Yoga Works style, because I got that phone call from Madi who said,
I haven't heard this story.
Oh, you haven't heard this story? So, she's tough, right? Okay. So the first time I went out and did my little sequence, I had 60 people, which is too many, and it was a scene, and there were people making out in the back, and I'm like, Bhagavad Gita, kissing, I mean, maybe, but, please, get a room, And then I got the phone call, because soon it went to, my teaching is in context of intimacy, of like 10 or 15 people, and I got the phone call. You either fill that hall or you're not coming back here. And you're too much like a guru and we don't like you. So it was like, yeah, I don't know if you heard that. Quite the dressing down. And I said, okay, bye. And then started it in my living room, and we met every third Wednesday, and Lisa was part of that group. And what Lisa has also done, and she'll share her own story, but studied really extensively with BTS Iyengar, and has taught for us various times at LMU, and taught a course with his permission about Mr. Iyengar. And we had developed what we thought would be a series, and like I wanted the Muktananda people come to talk about Muktananda, and they were too terrified because there'd been so much controversy with Muktananda. And we sort of ran out of steam with that. I taught a course on my own guru that was quite important to me. But what Lisa has done is just carry it forward. And what she's going to share today, as we talked about, I think, and she has a wonderful Pranayama Class there every month, so if you want, she'll let you know about that. But she's going to talk about her training with Iyengar, the founding of Yoga Works, the aftermath of the corporatization of Yoga Works, her contribution to the curriculum, which I'm going to be completely ridiculous and say, I think you had a little bit of hand in it, because you were writing it as we were studying together. So I will never say a word of criticism aside what I just did for Yoga Works, and because it's doing such amazing work. And then as we become the elders, I mean, we used to be kids, but as we become the elders, how we view the future. So. And her father, okay, that really nice camel mohair suit jacket that I wore yesterday, and I wear it once in a while, and I said, oh, you look so nice. That was her dad's.
Oh, wow, I forgot about that too.
That's so beautiful.
And you wore it just to check it out.
Well, I didn't wear it last night,
No,
but
okay.
yeah, earlier in the day.
Oh,
But her dad was a very, very famous neurophysiologist who was the pioneer for caloric reduction. You may want to talk about some of your insight into health and well-being and a little bit of that.
First, let me ask, who are you?
See?
Aside from that we all have kind of a common interest. What's your
My
name?
name is Alex. I just moved here in September or end of August from Canada to do the master's in yoga studies this year. I've been practicing yoga since I was in high school, but really was interested in the philosophy side of it and sort of the social justice side of yoga as well. So trying to kind of reconcile those interests while I'm here.
Alex, right?
Alex, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
And I'm Grace, and I'm also in Alex's cohort, the Masters. I moved here from Northern California, and then before that Chicago and Indiana, where I went to school. My background's in music, not in yoga, but like all of us have been doing yoga for years and years, and here I am.
Great.
I'm Judith. I'm here for the master's program, although I lived in Los Angeles before. I've done yoga on and off all my life. First time I did it, I was 2 with my grandmother. And, yeah.
And she has a PhD in high tech.
Information systems. Yeah, that was my former life as a professor.
It'll come in handy.
Remember what I said about GeoCities? You know what GeoCities is?
I'm not familiar with that.
It was one of the very first website companies.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't hear when you said that. I never.
Yeah, Carol Rossi used to work for them, and she cashed out and then became a yoga teacher at home.
Resurrection.
I'm Erin, and I'm also in the master's program. I've lived in Santa Monica 20 years, so I'm very familiar with Yoga Works. Been going there since 20 years, since I first moved to LA, and then switched around Sacred Movement and all the other places. And I won't tell you where I'm practicing now, but
It's all good.
I go through phases. I like it all. I like to practice everything.
And she grew up in a Rudrananda family.
In southern Indiana.
Okay.
And just really grateful to be in this master's program because it just seems like the next step on my path. Oh, I have 3 kids.
And they're all boys.
And then there's that.
That's
And
it.
then there's them.
Thank you.
I'm Sara Harrington. I'm the program administrator for the yoga program and a yoga teacher, mostly of kids. And actually my first real yoga class ever was at a Yoga Works in New York, which is where I moved from. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
I love Yoga Works.
Jason, first year master's program as well. originally from Cleveland. I studied with Jivamukti and Anu Sara, a teacher at the time. And then when I came out here, I was transitioning from international student travel and education to my current path, which is I teach at Santa Monica High School, yoga in the PE department.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and when I first moved and I was kind of trying to figure it all out, I'd gotten a job working at, when Exhale had just bought Sacred Movement. And so I've heard like some of the stories of, like Shankar and Shiva, Shipman, and Nakshram and all these people. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about the evolution of it all.
And he's been with Yoga Ed for how many
Oh
years?
yes, Yoga Ed now for 4 years. 4 years. So teaching people how to teach yoga in a public school setting.
I'm glad that I haven't heard about Yoga Ed for like 10 years or so, because I was considering folding it into Yoga Works at some point. So I'm glad it's still happening.
Yes.
I'm Lydia, and I'm representing my cohort. They all had, one was evacuated, Daria was evacuated from Malibu. Susan is tending to a family crisis. Sean had to, so they all wanted to be here. And I was going to ask, would you mind so much if I recorded your presentation?
Okay.
And I've been doing yoga for over 30 years. And
Just a baby.
but I've only been teaching for about 4 years. And got my 200-hour certification back in 13. And
Who did you do it with?
Tamal Dodge.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
great. He's great.
So funny.
And this is, I feel privileged to be on this journey with yoga studies at LMU.
That's a good group. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris. I remember you came and talked to LMU maybe 5 years ago.
I recognized you.
Yeah. As soon as you came in, oh yeah, I remember. I'm the current clinical professor, so I work with Chris in teaching the program. And I just finished my PhD at UC Davis. And I used to be a regular at Anne's class, 6 a.m. at the Yoga Works in El Segundo. I can't remember Anne's last name, but
And
you still-
Ben?
yes, love that class. So I love Yoga Works, and I want to hear more about it as well. And I've also taken classes with Jasmine Lee in Santa Monica, and so yeah, it's good to be here.
How long have you all been sitting here?
This room?
It's hot.
Did you make it there?
Yeah.
She's amazing.
No, I was here at 6:02. Felt terrible.
She was at Sunday Ground, that's right.
Yeah. Oh.
And she has 3 boys.
And you probably did a hot yoga session in between.
She's a sacred woman, what can we say?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you all to begin lying down.
Sounds great.
And let's lie down, I think considering the room, let's lie down with the crown of your head facing the center, and you'll need enough room to extend your arms overhead. So it'll be like all your hands will be in the middle. Oh, you want me?
No?
Is that okay in the sun? Or you did
Anyone doesn't want to be in the sun,
Judith always loves the sun.
Judith is the sun for If you prefer being in the sun, get on the sun side. Okay, and just make sure you can extend your arms overhead and you won't run into somebody.
Good.
Sacred woman.
Okay.
sacred fingers.
Okay, so take a moment. We have many elements to the self. There's the body now, the weight of the body, supported by the earth. There's a certain weight to the mind. And just as the earth has the gravitational pull to draw the body weight down, releasing, the heart has a gravitational pull to draw the mind inward. You'll feel the natural rise and fall of your breath. And within what we call the rib cage, consider the rib cage rather as if between each rib were an alcove in a temple. And the inner sanctum, the heart. And as you draw pilgrimage, the mind being drawn, the weight of thoughts, impulses, desires being drawn inward. For the heart is the seat of the soul, the seat of consciousness. The body, the vehicle, release it into the support of the earth. The earth element to the body, the bones, be supported. You may feel sensation in the body, in the lips, behind the eyes. You may feel the pull and tug behind the eyelids of the front brain. Just observe what arises and recognize these two gravitational forces. The gravitational force of the earth draws you down, and the gravitational of the heart draws you in. The body becomes replenished as we subdue the element of fire and allow the element of water to come to rest evenly, equally. For the body is 80% fluid, and as it is supported by the earth element beneath you, allow that fluid in the body to rest and spread. And notice now because we're more sensitive once we've taken a few moments to shift our orientation inward. Notice the shape of the body without it needing to be any particular way. However you positioned yourself when I asked you to lie down. Notice the touch points of the legs. The calves, the right calf, left calf, the position of the heel, right heel, left heel. Sensitize this sensory organ of the mind. Then notice the flesh of the buttocks. Does one spread? And if you don't feel, it's fine too. And drawing your attention up to the shoulder blades. Okay, if you're in any way uncomfortable in your shoulders, just take your arms at your sides. And without needing it, there's no right or wrong, rather cultivating sensitivity to what is. For only when we can be present with what is do we have a neutral point to begin from. asking you to do something a little bit difficult because as the body begins to relax, there's an anticipation to relax. And I'm asking you to be inwardly wakeful, to stay fresh. For some of us, there's a very different effect. When we lie down, it's as if the mind wants to stay present, engaged. To help release that front brain, to enable the largest sensory organ of the body, the skin, to become more sensitive, soften the skin of the forehead. So that brow is the seat of our worry. Let it soften, yield. Relax the jaw. Now bend your knees and place the soles of your feet on the floor. With your thumbs, gently slide the flesh of the buttocks toward your heels. And so if you felt a disparity right to left, you can spread one buttock out to the side perhaps, or preferably, if you have the room, take your arms far enough from your body so that the armpits can breathe. Palms up to the ceiling. Now, I'm going to ask you to do a very small movement to enable the skin from the back of the body to release from the base of the neck down toward your heels and tailbone. It's very small. Gently push your feet, your knees will stay bent, push your feet down into the ground and away from you. Okay, just until you feel the traction, knees will stay bent, until you feel that little traction of the skin of the back of the body releasing away from the shoulders. And now slide one leg straight and slide the other leg straight. Okay, flex the feet. Let's keep the feet together for now. Okay, flex the feet and reach out through your heels. There's the action of doing, of reaching from the calves to the heels. And then there's the reflection of sensing. If the skin of your calf is in contact with the ground, now, is it spreading? Is it lengthening? There's no right or wrong, just feel. Okay? But feet are flexed. That's it. Does anybody have lower back problems? Raise your hand. Okay, so if you'd rather keep your knees bent, feel free. Now, reaching through the heels, extend your arms straight up to the ceiling. Straight up to the ceiling. That's it. Okay, so as you reach from the calves to the heels and the buttocks to the calves to the heels, when you take your arms overhead, for today we'll take the palms to face each other. When you take your arms overhead, stretch from the sides of the ribs. As if your arms begin at that bottom rib. Slowly take your arms, when you take your arms shoulder width apart, slowly take your arms overhead and reach, 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 reach. All the way from the bottom rib. Okay, arms onto the floor overhead. And if you reach one of your neighbors, that's fine, your neighbors. Continue to stretch through the arms, stretch through the legs. Relax. As you elongate, so the organs of action, the legs and the arms, we're using those to elongate the spine, to free the diaphragm. Okay, so there is a dynamic action, but the intention is to create more freedom, more spaciousness to the abdominal organs, the respiratory organs, the heart. As you extend through the arms and legs, relax again that place between the forehead. Relax the lips and the jaw. Can we act in such a way, okay, and yet the action is skillful? Okay, so we can use a hammer or we can use a scalpel to build, to create. Okay, we'll be here for another minute and a half. As you extend the arms, as you extend the legs, feel, okay, now take the palms up to the ceiling, okay, now, but still on the floor, just palms facing the ceiling. Okay, now feel the shoulder blades on the ground beneath you. Okay, is one higher than the other? Is one touching and one's not touching? Now, so the earth gives you a platform, and if there is one shoulder that seems to be digging into the floor, the shoulder blade, okay, can you draw that shoulder blade in toward the chest? Or if one arm feels longer than the other. Okay? We all have, there is no such thing as perfect symmetry except on a deep, deep, deep molecular level. So these little variances, these nuances, the constant flux in nature, become a form, a medium for contemplation, an embodied contemplation. Okay, then release your arms back at your sides. Okay, and with your arms at your sides, or in whatever position is comfortable for you, it's lower. Let's here. Move back a little bit so your head is on this cushion, or get rid of the cushion. Yeah, that's going to be more comfortable. In yoga, we have various, and in any contemplative practice, we have various supports, shalamba. I mentioned the earth. Feel the earth beneath you. The breath within us is another essential support. Feel the rise and fall of a natural breath. Gratitude is a support. In gratitude for the support of the earth, in gratitude for the support of the breath, the earth that supports in so many ways. Housing, food, warmth. The breath that supports and animates. The breath that we all share, the air collectively. This attitude of gratitude from the support within the heart, in the same way that we share the air, these attitudes that we cultivate, gratitude, friendship, empathy, equanimity, patience. They affect us in the element of water in the body, they affect the emotional body, they affect the plasticity in the brain. These are very potent supports. There are some supports that we take for granted until our attention is drawn to them. Such as I just suggested, that you feel the support of the earth beneath you. So gratitude for the earth, and gratitude for the breath, and gratitude for the companionship around you, for the Sangha, of which you are an elemental part. And gratitude for the teachings. At a time in our history, in our life, when there is a great amount of flux, turmoil, these supports that we practice will help us maintain our equilibrium. Let your next inhalation be a little bit deeper. And exhaling, place your hands anywhere on your body that brings peace. It gives you a sense of connecting with yourself. The touch of the skin on the palms of the hands, as if this were a namaste, a greeting of kindness, of support. And let your next inhalation again be a little bit deeper. And exhaling, bend your left knee and roll to your right side. And lie quietly on your right side for a moment. Roll your left chest toward the floor and use your left hand to sit. So let the head be the last thing as you come to a seated position. Okay. Let's see if we have enough blocks for everybody. I see a few over there. Okay, I block the pillows can work. Yeah, there's another purple one. Oh, perfect. We have it. Okay, any knee problems? Okay.
A little bit.
Okay. If it bothers you, let me know. We can put a blanket between your calf and your thumb. Okay, just watch for a moment. We're going to take child's pose with your head resting on the block. And I'll ask you to stretch your arms like you did when you were lying down on the floor a moment ago, as if your arms began at that bottom rib. So you're really going to reach and extend. Okay? Then I'll ask you to gently pull the mat toward you. If it really bothers you, just put a blanket down. Okay, place the skin of the forehead so that the skin from the brow releases down toward the eyelids. Okay, so you'll feel, I'm talking a lot about the skin, you'll feel a difference if you position the head so that the skin moves up towards a natural hairline versus down toward the brows. And again, that place between the eyes, when I pacify, release, soothe, soften. And knees wide enough, just wide enough apart to support your inner ribs. Or to support your side ribs. That's it. Now reach your arms forward. Okay, walk your arms so the elbows straighten. Grace? No, next to Grace.
Ginger.
Ginger?
Judy.
Judy. Okay. Judith. Okay. Head wider apart. Well, wider apart. Take your hands a little wider apart. Yeah, there you go. And palms flat. Okay, reach the arms forward. Okay, as if from that bottom rib, your arms were raised to the sun, extending. Now, I talked about the heart being kind of the gravitational pull of the body. That the heart is also, sometimes, we refer to the soul as being emanating from the warmth of the sun. So as if your arms were raised, extend. Okay, so the elbows straighten, the triceps straighten, the sides of the armpits. And if there's any discomfort in the shoulders, take your hands a little wider apart. And as you extend towards one another, forward in a circle, as you extend your fingers towards one another, again, soften the skin on the forehead. Okay, so we can coordinate. We have this body that propels us through life. It's a gift. Okay? And its nature is, from the time that we're born, to begin to fade. Okay? Entropy. So what do we need to do to craft the chariot of the body to carry us through all the many adventures of life? We want to keep the diaphragm free, we want to keep the chest open, the back strong. Okay. And part of what will help both of those is to extend the arms completely, to open the sides of the chest. It's also the position itself. Everybody take your hands a little wider apart. Okay. Also, as you extend through the arms, as the armpits open, it's an awakening. Okay. When we're fearful, we kind of curl up into a little ball. So as we extend, we're using the block so that the neck is in line with the spine. So that from the breastbone, you extend forward toward the crown of the head. Okay? So that the heart is extending toward the crown of the head. Okay, so having positioned your body, now, feel, are the hands touching evenly? Just notice. Does one arm feel longer than the other? One shoulder thicker than the other? For however many years you've been on this planet, you've molded this lump of clay, so to speak. And yet it's malleable. It can change. It will change with skill. And now be another minute or two. Interlace your hands behind your back. Roll your shoulders together. Maybe keep the hands close to the buttocks. That's it. Okay? And as you externally rotate the arms, that is, as you draw the outer shoulders up toward the ceiling, that's it. Okay? Still, and then extend the elbows as much as you can. That's it. Okay, still softening the forehead on the floor. So externally rotate this way. That's it. Okay. So now the side walls of the chest, what in Iyengar Yoga we call the armpit chest, opens. Okay. The chest is broad from center to the side, and yet the neck is soft. The head is in line with the spine. And then place your hands onto the floor in front of your knees and push with your hands to sit. Okay. Now that you all have nice little red spots on your forehead. Okay, sit in any position that's comfortable. That's I just wanted to give you an experience. So there are so many paths to the self, paths to realization. And as the Vedas say, truth is one, paths are many. The path that I chose was one through the body, kind of an embodied. And Guruji B.K.S. Iyengar, you've probably all read some of the Upanishads. Yeah. You're familiar with that image of the chariot? The body is the chariot. The horses, there are 6 horses. The horses are the emotions. And a horse, unless it's trained, unless it's tamed, the horses run wild. It's their instinct. It's their instinct to run and reach and forage. It's our instinct. It's the instinct of the mind and the emotions to run and reach and grasp and cling. So the body is the chariot. We learn how to mold it. We learn how to create as strong, as vibrant of a chariot as we can, for the journey is long, the journey is arduous, when we're really looking at how can we, not only within ourselves, but in our community, what can we do, how can we be a conduit, to bring more grace into the world, to bring more discussion into the world. We need to maintain our health, we need to maintain our vital energy, we need to know how to replenish ourselves, at times, because those times will happen to all of us. So I chose kind of the path of the body. I was a dancer before I found yoga, and when I found yoga, it was like Cinderella. It's like, oh, my life just changed. It was literally overnight like that. So in this image of the chariot, it's in the Katha Upanishad, I believe. Arjuna is the one holding the reins. This is an interpretation. And Krishna, so from the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is of course Arjuna's kind of his higher self, his consciousness, who's kind of that ear. So the sense of self that we cultivate in practice, the discerning self, as opposed to the reactive self. The discerning self, Krishna, is feeding Arjuna some kind of guidance. Arjuna is holding on to the reins, because you've got to hold on to those reins, because the mind will go there, and the mind will go there, and we have so many sensory stimuli, especially when we live in the city. We just come to a wonderful place like this and have some time to be kind of still and create that inner equanimity and emotional stability that's so vital as we walk this path, particularly in a city. So this image of the chariot and Arjuna, which is each one of us kind of learning how to train the mind and the senses and the emotions. So the chariot, the body. We have spine, we have legs, we have arms, we have muscles, we have cartilage, we have flesh, organs. And then we have the vital energies underneath those, the vayus, and the chakras, and all of the subtle anatomy that we know from yoga. The most tangible form of energy is the physical body. And as we mold the physical body, as we skillfully mold the physical body, it enables the subtle energy of the body to move. The vayus, the apana vayu that releases energy so that we don't get congested, constipated, physically, emotionally, spiritually. The prana vayu that uplifts, that brings more vitality, that we understand how to generate it, where it can go. So what B.K.S. Iyengar did is he started with the most practical, the most accessible, what we can see, what we can do, what we can feel. And over his lifetime, he realized, and I'm coming to realize after over 30 years of practice, that on this path, by adhering to the body and sensitizing ourselves to what happens in various shapes, what's happening to my organs, what's happening to my breath, how does this shape affect my breath, how does my breath in this pose affect my legs, my back, my shoulders. my equanimity, my unrest or my rest or whatever's happening to somebody. I had a student come up to me after class today. We mostly did inversions, so headstand, shoulder stand, and a lot of supine leg stretches. Because when we go upside down, and this is a physiological effect, when we go upside down, and when we can go upside down, and we've practiced long enough that it's, we've gone past the learning curve and we can stay in these poses comfortably. Now, there's a very deep restorative quality that happens in the body. So I intentionally did an inversion class today. And I brought in Satyagraha, since I saw it last night. Now that as practitioners, and this is right from the script last night because it just came out of me, we are really athletes of the soul. An athlete, a real athlete, practices skillfully towards mastery. And mastery can be a musician, an artist, and teaching, scientist, but mastery requires a certain kind of discipline. And so when we approach the body, the discipline of the body, the shapes of the body, we face all of the elements that we face in life. We face fear, we face pain, we face injury. Now, we face loss. And how we kind of navigate, with the body, through the body, and by the body. This is our chariot. And this really was B.K.S. Iyengar's legacy. So that said, I'd like to read just a few of his words. This is from a book that the course that I taught at LMU was on this book, Light on Life, okay, which came out in 2005. He took the Yoga Sutras and his practice and put it into a very conversational form. So it's not sutra by sutra by sutra, but it's really what is the kind of narrative behind the sutras. Kind of similar in a way to what you did with yoga and loneliness. Okay. So, it's like I was going to start here and I said, oh, maybe I should start here. Then I want to start there. Okay. As long as the body is not in perfect health, you are caught in body consciousness alone. This distracts you from healing and culturing the mind. We need sound bodies so we can develop sound minds. The body will prove to be an obstacle unless we transcend its limitations and remove its compulsions. Hence, we have to learn how to explore beyond our known frontiers. That is to expand and interpenetrate our awareness, how to master ourselves. Asana is ideal for this. The keys to unlocking our potential are the qualities of purity and sensitivity. The point about purity, or simply cleanliness, as it is often called in yoga text, is not primarily a moral one. It is that purity permits sensitivity. Sensitivity is not weakness or vulnerability, it is clarity of perception and allows judicious, precise action. Okay, and then one more. So we ended with action, judicious and precise action. The real meaning of knowledge is that action and analysis synchronize. Action and analysis synchronize. So when you were lying down, I had you flex your feet and stretch your heels and then feel the differences right to left. Just kind of cultivate a deeper sensitivity. So you kind of had to slow down the mind. I wasn't asking you to do it this way or that way. There was no right or wrong. It was just becoming more sensitive. The real meaning of knowledge was that action and analysis synchronize. Slow motion allows reflective intelligence. So some of you have perhaps done like a walking meditation or Tai Chi or Qigong or something like that, slow motion. It allows our minds to watch the movement and leads to a skillful action. The art of yoga lies in the acuity of observation. Okay? The art of yoga lies in the acuity of observation. So to me, and then what he said before, clarity of perception. Okay? So, people often talk about Iyengar yoga, and he kind of had to rebuttal this throughout his life, because they would say, you teach physical yoga, it's not spiritual yoga. And he'd say, how can you tell the difference between the body and the spirit? It's life. So using the body as the most practical vehicle, cultivating sensitivity deeper and deeper to enable clear perception. And my experience, so that's kind of the trajectory. The asanas are props. We think of this as a prop, but the asana is a prop. The teacher is a prop. The real work happens inside how you are with yourself, how you perceive, and the patience. It takes tremendous patience. What I find is, there is no straight line in nature. It's always kind of weaving, and just as I have like an aha moment, it's like, oh, and then there's that, and the deeper we go, the more interesting it gets, and the more complex it gets, because we're going into deeper layers. So that's my introduction to you on Iyengar yoga. BKS Iyengar came here initially in the 60s, so he was one of the pioneers of this kind of body form, although Lilius Folan, I think, was on television, and Richard Hittleman, and it's all before your time. But when I first started teaching yoga, I would tell people that this was like 1982, I would tell people that I teach yoga, and they'd say, oh, you're going to light incense and chant. I say, well, no, not really. And now when I say I teach yoga, they say, oh, you're going to get a good workout and sweat. I say, well, no, not really. So the kind of, the public perception of yoga, it's all good, and you'll find all of that. But the public perception of yoga has really changed, from we're going to burn incense and chant to, sweating. The good thing, I think, is that everyone, whenever they think of yoga, we think of health. And to a certain extent, we think of harmony. Now, why do people come to a yoga class as opposed to going to the gym? There's a sense that as we come together in a yoga class, power yoga, core yoga, all of that alike. Whenever we come together in class for a yoga class, there's an intention that we're coming to this place for a certain kind of experience. In Iyengar yoga, we always begin in class with the invocation to Patanjali, because Guruji, he didn't teach Iyengar yoga. In his words, he taught Patanjali yoga. It was his students who started calling it Iyengar yoga. He never said, I teach Iyengar yoga. His students called it that. And so beginning the class with the invocation, we acknowledge that it really is the study of Patanjali that we are woven into. And he used the image in, have you all studied the Yoga Sutras? Has anybody not?
I've been exposed to them.
You've been exposed to them. Okay, that's fine.
She's being modest, but she'll get there.
Yeah, you'll get there. You'll get there. And then there's Dr. I am just so, it's so fun to see how the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutras and the Upanishads and then Buddhism and the Dhammapada, and they all kind of, it's like there's this crystal and each one is a prism. So you'll see repetitions that then reinforce, and perhaps one path highlights or reveals a certain part or uses a vocabulary that helps to embellish something in another teaching. So in the Yoga Sutras, it's called the kind of eightfold path, and that's Buddhism. So you have the 8 steps. But Guruji called them petals. And he often, another image he used was the tree of yoga. He wrote a book called The Tree of Yoga back in the 80s or early 90s. Now, and like petals, that which is the closest, and this in a way is like the koshas. So that which is the closest would be samadhi, that place of simplicity and purity, where the moment as it reveals itself is known in its entirety. There's a luminosity to that moment, and we've all had glimpses of it. It's a sense of presence without that moment needing to be any way other than what it is. That's the middle of the flower. And then there's these other petals. The outermost petal is the yamas and the niyamas, which are moral principles, ethical principles, and then comes asana. So why the moral and the ethical principles before asana? Why the ethical and moral principles before asana?
I'm just going to speak from my experience.
That's all any of us can do.
Until I was able to find a place in my life, usually, and it wasn't the most pleasant place to be in my life, did I have to come to a time or place when I had to practice the yamas and the niyamas, then my asana and the rest began to unfold. So before that, I just did yoga. And sometimes I jogged, and sometimes I did, other things.
Let me summarize what I heard, because you had a really poignant phrase in there. That there was a time in your life when things were difficult. And as you, but you did yoga, and sometimes you jogged. And then as kind of the moral and ethical and things in your life started falling into place, then, what was your phrase? You started in
The path unfolded for yoga even.
yeah, evolving in your yoga evolved.
Yes. I didn't see that until in hindsight.
Right. The Atyayoga Pradipika, which is kind of the sister text to the Yoga Sutras, we look at things historically, and when the Atyayoga Pradipika was written, India was very different. There were fiefdoms and kingdoms, and yogis were, in some instances, considered a very important prize that a king would have a yogi, because yogis had these powers. But for a yogi to cultivate, the good yogis, for a yogi to cultivate his powers, he had to have a small, it's written like this in the Atyayoga Pradipika, the exact dimensions I forgot, but a small room with a sterile floor in a benevolent kingdom. So the yamas and the niyamas are not included in the Atyayoga Pradipika. And because if you live in a benevolent kingdom, everything is kind of being provided for you. We live, and when the Yoga Sutras were written, they were written at a time when there was a tremendous amount of turmoil and discussion in India, and particularly amongst the philosophers. What is the nature of life? What is the nature of the mind? And just like now, different points of view. And so the yamas and the niyamas became those ethical principles: honesty, nonviolence, not stealing, generosity. How do we protect our vital energy? Those became kind of the foundation for a benevolent community, really. And so until we have in some way cultivated that, and it's like first chakra survival stuff, really. But we still come to class. We can still do yoga. The practice evolves, when kind of our life, when we find the pieces in our life and the pattern in such a way that there's more stability. So I think for young people, at least when I was in my late 20s or my late teens and 20s, we're trying to find ourselves, we're trying to find our identity, we're trying to figure out how we fit into things and what's my future. It's a very unstable time, and it's terrific that they go to these strong classes and they move. I once, Brian Kest, have any of you worked with Brian Kest? Really big, sweet guy, Probably 10, 12 years ago, he was doing teacher trainings, and he invited me to Cancun to introduce Iyengar Yoga to his teacher training group. So I went, and big room, and I took his class, and and it was all young people. And Brian at the time was very loquacious. Let me say, he would just, as an Iyengar teacher, I say, oh my God, that person's knees. Oh my God, look at those shoulders. Oh my, But they're young, And what he was basically telling them is the person next to you doesn't matter. Your focus is on your mat. Be with yourself now. And it was really, really powerful. To see somebody work with that age group. And then as I came together with them, then we could kind of look at the structure of the body and what is skillful action, and that when we think of the body as a temple, and we even look at the room, the temple was only going to be as sound, as stable, and hence the congregation inside secure, as sound and stable as the foundation upon which the temple's built. The walls have to be even, the posts, and the same is true with the body. So, so Patanjali Yoga, the ethical principles, the moral principles, and then asana. Now, when Iyengar taught, he weaves all of this into the asana practice. When are you being aggressive on your body? When is, so he'll go from the most general, when are you beating your body up? And I remember one time I injured my shoulder because I did a handstand when I was angry. I'm going to do a handstand, get this out of me. Oh, I was mindless. And it took me a few years to kind of put my shoulder back together. So, not to be aggressive, non-violent, non-harming, okay? Kindness, to practice with kindness. But that can be from the gross to the most subtle. That when we straighten the arm, the bicep is meant to contract, the tricep is meant to extend. But if our structure, the structure of the arm is such that one is, I don't have it, but does anyone have a hyperextended elbows in here that you know of? Show your arm in this way though. Yeah, because you definitely have a carrying angle. You can palm face up to the ceiling and straight out to the side. Now straighten your arm completely. You don't have much of, no, you don't have hyperextension. You have a carrying angle. Okay. Now bring your arm forward. Okay. Okay. So do you see how your arm kind of gets crooked to the side? Okay. Okay. So that's what we call a carrying angle. So this joint here. Okay. But everybody take your arm out to the side. That's it. Stretch your arm completely. This is a very interesting. Okay. as close to a carrying angle, but it's interesting, because if I did this in, yeah, so with Chris, if you see, and it's very, very mild, I do not put your arms down now. Okay, it's very, very mild. But you can see that this chip of the elbow, okay, is higher. You know, so the arm would have that kind of an angle. So do this for a moment. Everybody, extend your arm straight out in front of you. Straighten the arm completely. So it's the tricep muscle that straightens the arm. Yeah, you can put your hand there, feel the tricep. Now, put your hand on the bicep muscle. Okay. Bend your elbow slightly. You'll feel the bicep muscle contract, yes? Okay. Now, keep that muscle slightly contracted as you extend the arm. Okay. Can you keep it firm as you extend the arm? So that there's a rhythm, Guruji would say a rhythm, between how the two sides of the arm extend to hold the bone. Yeah, and that's what I did. Okay? Particularly, and with the legs, I remember hyperextended knees are, you know, people are kind of phobic sometimes about hyperextended knees. I think there's currently a phobia about them, you know, unfortunately. So that when you straighten the knees, it looks like what Guruji would say, this is the bottom chip of the knee, this is the top chip of the knee. You can see with my knee, the bottom chip of the knee is behind the top. Can you see that? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, so that's if I'm driving my kneecap back. Like the arm, the hamstring contracts, the quadricep extends. Hamstring contracts, quadricep. So can I straighten my leg in such a way that this contracts so that I bring the bottom and the top of the leg in one line, so that I'm not overextending a joint. I'm stabilizing a joint. Okay? And that takes a lot of sensitivity and practice. But it's the sensitivity that, you know, enables this purity that he's talking about. What Iyengar's son and daughter, Gita Iyengar and his son Prashant Iyengar, Prashant would say the democracy in the body. You know, so the bicep and the tricep contribute equally in the democratic body, and you know, in a good democracy.
According to that.
Yes, a benevolent kingdom. Benevolent kingdom of the body. It's really interesting. Guruji passed away in 2014, and his daughter has been teaching. Gita Iyengar is a formidable presence, incredibly dynamic woman, and she's contributed much to the field of yoga. She wrote Yoga, a Gem for Women, and developed an understanding that the practice for women during different stages of their life should change. So when we're on a menstrual cycle, what to do to help with PMS, to help with heavy flow, to help with amenorrhea when there's no flow, what to do for prenatal, postnatal, what to do during the different trimesters, what to do with different complications. She explored and developed a tremendous body of knowledge for all of that. Menopause. These things that, when I first started teaching, you know, and I remember, you know, I would say, ladies, if you're on your menstrual, no, before I taught, when I was a student, I thought, what is this about? I don't know that I believe this. No, and I was menstruating, and I did a headstand, about a 5 or 6 minute headstand. My period stopped and didn't start until the next month. It's like really powerful things.
Was that a good thing?
No, at that point in my life it was not.
Okay.
You know, no, that's a good question, because there are times when we might want to do that. You know, if we're menopausal, then we might actually want to. So she's contributed a lot. She's now in her 70s. She still teaches a little bit. And then Prashant Iyengar is, I would say he's really coming into his own. Let's do this. Rather than explain, let me, in my own feeble way, give you an experience of how he would begin class. Okay, so sit upright. You can sit in Virasana, you can sit in Sukhasana, Swastikasana. Okay, but sit in, you can sit in a chair, but sit in a position where you can lift up through your spine. Okay, bring the palms together in front of the heart. Close the eyes. How will you sit to prepare the body for an auspicious moment? Elongate through the sides of the body. Lift the heart. From the nape of the neck, release the skin of the back body down. Spread from the chest, roll the inner arm to the outer arm. So there's an inner buoyancy inside, an inner spaciousness. Stabilize the body. And allow the breath to deepen. Having skillfully shaped the body, let the breath fill gradually, the breath rolling up the front of the body, descending down the back of the body. The gradual rhythm, so that we bring the body into a serene, stable, silent, sanctified, sober state. We bring the mind into a silent, serene, sober, sanctified state. We drop the mind's eye inward toward the heart, begin a silent Om. And as that Om begins to permeate and spread and fill the body, let's take 3 Oms all together. And I'm going to follow that with the invocation to Patanjali. If you happen to be familiar with it, feel free to join me. We'll take 3 Oms together. Inhale. Sahasara Shirsam Shwetam Pranamami Patanjalim. Hari Om. Inhale, lift your heart. And exhale, lower your head. Release the hands. Allow the head to lift. And the eyes to open. sit in a comfortable position. So Prashant, Iyengar's son, is really kind of taking the helm now. And he's a wordsmith. I mean, the serene, sober, sanctimous, sanctimonious, silent, it just spills out of him. He's a very, very prolific writer. And he is not interested in the technicalities of the posture. It's been really interesting watching the family, to have a family be in the public eye like the Iyengar family has been.
Are they in Encinitas?
No, they're in Pune, India.
Oh, okay.
They're in Pune,
There's an
India.
Iyengar down there.
Oh, there's an Iyengar Institute here in Los Angeles. There's
I just thought that they
school
were there.
in-
I feel like that there was some.
There used to be one in Encinitas. It moved to, Carolyn Belko was down there. I don't think it's Encinitas. It's close to there. There's several in San Diego. But the Iyengar family lives in Pune, India. Pune is in a way to Mumbai what Santa Barbara is to Los Angeles. It's where the colonial British would go in the summer when it got too hot in Mumbai. Okay, so when it gets too hot in LA, it's like, oh, it'd be nice to go to Santa Barbara. But Pune has changed. When I first...
When did you first go?
Oh, when I first went, those were the days. I first went in 1986, January of 1986. No cars, cows in the street, incense, and women following the cows. And if the cow took a crap, they would collect it, because that poop is used in the floor of these huts that I talked about, where a yogi would sit. Because the cow poop, once it's matted down and it dries, it's sterile. And so they would collect this poop, or they would form it into little patties, and they could use it for heat. They could burn it for heat. So I would be walking in class early in the morning, the cows would be strolling, and they'd be picking up the poop, and it was really bucolic. And I went basically every other year. I've been over 20 times now. It's wonderful for the Indian people, that they now have a thriving middle class. And they have many of the things that we have. And Pune is now, the traffic. Cows are not allowed in the city anymore. The traffic and the pollution and the honking and the, it's a very different life. I'll just give you a couple of Pune stories. When we go, or when we go as students, we can go for 1 month, we can go for 2 months. So we take classes in the morning. Some of us can assist in medical class in the afternoon if we're teachers. But there's always pranayama. There's a pranayama class once or twice a week. And the pranayama class is usually in the later afternoon, and Gita is an inspired pranayama teacher. I've gone places, amazing places. So this one particular pranayama class, there's things you can test with. There's the noise of the traffic outside. Sometimes you're in pranayama, you're being eaten alive by mosquitoes. And she just says, in true shavasana, you let go. Your sensory organs are so removed from the skin that even a mosquito could bite and it would. And that happened to me several times. But this particular time, we came out of pranayama. There was a funny smell in the air. And we realized, because mosquitoes carry some very dangerous, they carry dengue and, so they had sprayed DDT. And we had just finished doing pranayama. So India has those phenomenally, poignant, and then it has the other extreme. And that's kind of what's so unusual about it, what's so unique about it. I had the kind of grace of working with Guruji on many occasions, but 3 stories, I think.
I want to hear our young girl stories.
So I had been teaching, I was certified, and I've been teaching Iyengar yoga probably for 12 years. And I wanted to bring one of my students to Pune, to medical class. She was a woman in her early 60s, quite tall, German woman, and she had lymphatic edema. And so, her arm would swell up, and the lymph tissue wouldn't drain, and so there was a danger that if it, that she could get an infection in her heart. So every night she had to hook herself up to this machine that would squeeze and let, squeeze and let, squeeze and let. And to come to Pune, she even had a traveling one, and she had a backup generator. But that's how potentially serious it was. So we were going to bring her to class to see what, and she was a long-time Iyengar student. So we walk into class. This is kind of a teacher-student relationship story. We walk in, we're like the first ones in there for medical class, and you have to sign up and have a letter of approval that you've been accepted into medical class. So I come in as her teacher, and I say, well, Guruji, this is the woman I wrote you about. And he said, he was kind of famous for this, he said, you Westerners, you think you can come whenever you want. I'm tired, I don't want to work with you today, go away. And it's like, so she's on the verge of tears, and I said, but Guruji, this is when you told us to come, and so he said, okay, show me what you do. Then I'm really on pins and needles. That's why I'm bringing her. I don't know what to do with her. And so in the Iyengar system, the first thing we teach people is standing poses. It's the organs of action, the legs and the arms. That's how we can get the energy moving into the chest, into the lymphatic system. So I said, okay, I'll start with standing poses. So I take her over to one of these props that we use, and I set her up. And within seconds, he's over and he's helping us. And it was very strenuous, the work he did with her. Now, a lot of, we talked about contracting the bicep and contracting the tricep. So he would have her arm in all these different positions and making fists and wrapping things around her arm to kind of constrict it, and then afterwards all the blood would flow in different positions to get the shoulders open. And and I came up to her armpit. I'm under 5 feet tall, and she was a really tall woman, but I'm her assistant. So Iyengar will get very impatient with me. I am there to serve her, and if I don't have what she needs, before he knows she needs it, it's really a teacher-student story. And I happened to be smaller than him, so I was in good striking distance, And for a while I thought, oh God, he's really picking on me, Being small, I was always, kind of the puny one in class, and my last name begins with W, so I was always the end of the line. So I was kind of that one who would try to not be seen. Well, you can't do that in this situation. He kept waking me up. Until I realized, I need to get my little self out of the way and be so ready to serve this person, to serve this woman. So it was a real teacher's, not that teacher's going to be nice and sweet and calm and loving and gracious and all of the projections that we might have about a spiritual teacher. No, this was a teacher that taught me to stand on my own 2 feet. And when she left, she was in tears. I'm not going to tell. No, she was a German woman who was really afraid of India. And when she first came into Pune, we went into a hotel. She was afraid of Indian food. We bought her kind of a pressure cooker, and we got her some potatoes and some beets and some vegetables, and we cooked for her in her room. By the end of the month, she was wearing Indian clothes. She bought an Indian carpet, and She's in her 80s now and has dementia, but she taught yoga. She taught yoga through SMCC and Emeritus College, and was a very, very much loved yoga teacher. So that was my first kind of, he really taught me to stand on my own feet.
Did she get off the machine?
She didn't have off the machine. Because when she came back to the US, she wasn't able, she didn't have the tenacity to keep up with the program. It would have required a good 2-hour practice every day. And I think she might have, but that takes a lot of tenacity. So I think the year before, I went to his 95th birthday, and he had had some fairly significant health issues. And it just happened to be that he was in kind of the lobby one day when I was, everybody was up in class and I was going to the bathroom. I had to go through the lobby, and he was sitting there. Because it's very rare to kind of just have one-on-one time with him. And I touched his feet, and then I started walking away because I don't want to impose on him. He called me over, and he showed me. He took his skin and he pulled it up, and then he let it go. Because he was 95, and the year before he had a very, very serious, I think it was a lung infection, and people were worried that he lost weight. And he said, "Look, I'm regaining the fluids in my body." He was, and as we get older, we'll see, just a little less flesh there. But, you could see, him, wanting to be available enough to establish a relationship. That was really, really important to me. Just that he would call me over and see, I can replenish this. So the stories are pretty endless.
He's promised 3.
A short one or a long one? Okay, this is a short one. One time I was bringing some not students to medical class, but students who wanted to study, who'd been studying with me for a while. And it's one of the strangest experiences. Maybe you've had an experience like this. I've never had an experience like this. I walked into the lobby. Everybody was signing up for the month. And I saw Guruji sitting there. Before I knew it, I was prone on the floor. I mean, it was like, surrounded by people, and there I was. And I grew up with that, intense sense of achieve, prove yourself, justify this. I had a lot of that in my background, and yet I had enough experience with him that something in me just surrendered. It was a really, really powerful experience.
Did he notice you?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
When he passed away, we all knew that he was, going. We were all waiting. But when he passed away, I took a picture of him and I put it on the floor, and I lit a candle. Another one of those odd moments. And my cat, her name is Devi Durga, because sometimes she's Durga, and most of the time she's Devi. She came and sat right in front of the picture and looked at the picture. Then I just started telling her stories. It was one of the most remarkable moments. So as a teacher, at his 95th birthday celebration, because he spoke probably publicly for the last time. And when he was young, BKS are his initials, and the acronym became known as Bang, Kick, and Slap. So we heard that, and his slap, and I've experienced it, when other teachers tried to imitate it, it wasn't, you know. And Iyengar yoga kind of had this reputation then, you know, of being very militaristic, and you know, the teachers were mean and they'd hit you. No. Well, that fortunately doesn't happen, at least I hope it doesn't happen anymore. But his touch, it was as if the Shakti in his hand was going past your brain that was trying to figure it out and going right into your body. It was one of the most remarkable things. But at this 95th birthday, he said that when I was young, you know, people said bang, kick, and slap. But now, it's benevolent, serene, benevolent, kind, and serene. You know, and yoga, you know, there was a tremendous change in him. And, you know, whether it's yoga, whether it's age, whether it's having grandchildren, you know, seeing us, raising us, you know, so as an older man, you know, the benevolent, kind, and serene was really, you know, became the acronym.
What year did you pass?
2014. Yeah.
I was with him just that prior.
Did you go? You did go and
It
see.
was so lovely. I have to show you the photo.
Yeah. Oh, good. Because Phil Goldberg also,
Yeah.
I think, got to see him. Oh, I was there. Oh, that's so cool.
So tell us about Yoga Works.
Yoga Works. Who mentioned that they were working with Anna Forrest?
That was me.
That was you, okay. I thought so. So what was interesting is Yoga Works opened in 1987. But before that, I taught yoga at the Center for Yoga in Larchmont. And then Anna Forrest and I opened up a yoga school together.
Okay.
Called the Turning Point Yoga and Dance Studio.
And that was on Montana, right?
That was on Ocean Park.
On Ocean Park. Okay, so I
Boulevard.
never was
Yeah.
there.
That was on Ocean Park Boulevard. And then she left, and then in '87, she came back, you know, she left for several years. So Mati, you know, Ezrati was running the yoga center at the time. You know, I had this center with Anna Forrest. And Mati, along with Alan Finger, who was teaching in Beverly Hills, Alan, I think, had a lot of the collateral, and Mati had the chutzpah. And they partnership to open the first Yoga Works on one room on Montana. Okay? Mati lived a couple blocks away. I was on either the first schedule or the second schedule. And Mati, this was before she and Chuck were together, actually. Okay? So there was a synthesis that happened. Mati and I were good friends, and at the time I did practice Ashtanga yoga myself. And so you know, we would practice together. I mean, Anna Forrest and I practiced, and Mati and I started practicing. And there was a respect that we had for each other through the practice. And I think because of my receptivity to Ashtanga yoga, and because of her curiosity in how to kind of improve the practice, you know, so we taught a teacher training together in our first teacher training together was in 1996, I think. I taught a teacher training with Eric Schiffman, and then one with Rod Stryker, and then Monty and I taught a teacher training together. And so it was the kind of Ashtanga and Iyengar, and for years in the Yoga Works teacher training program, which Monty and I then developed, back in the days of Xerox a picture from a book, use a glue stick, I would collage and then put it on the copy machine, and that's how we made our first teacher training manuals. So before computers, it was glue stick and copy machine and scissors. And So we developed the teacher training together, probably for 5 or 6 years, and each generation of the teacher training, the documentation kind of grew until we had homework and we had stick figures. In Iyengar yoga, we talk about the skin, we talk about lines of energy. I think that was already in the vernacular. Eric Schiffman used lines of energy. But Schiffman had studied with Iyengar yoga, or had studied with Guruji, he studied with Iyengar. Joel Kramer, if you're not familiar with Joel Kramer, is another groundbreaking pioneer of those days. And it's fascinating to watch his experience with yoga and the direction he went. You know, he started looking at authoritarianism in yoga, which is
Oh, that's Joel Kramer.
that
Okay.
Joel Kramer. Yeah. Is there another Joel Kramer?
No, but I just put the book
Oh, okay.
together with him. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had also studied with Iyengar and lines of energy and edges of resistance and things like that. That in some teacher trainings we use that language quite liberally now. Arrows of action. So Mati and I, we had these stick figures, and we would do, the arrows of action. You lift this way, and then we developed a language, roots and rebounds. Whatever's in contact with the earth presses down, and you build up from there. So we developed kind of gradually over time this whole, what became the kind of core root philosophy of YogaWorks. I think it was 2002. Is there anything you want to add? Feel free to jump in. In 2002, I think it was 2002, Mati and Chuck sold it to AskG's. They were at a really interesting crossroads. They expanded from one studio in Montana to 2 studios, which it is now, the East and the West Room. Then they opened up the Main Street studio, and it was just Chuck and Mati. And they worked, oh my God, if they got a call that the gate couldn't open at 6:30 in the morning on Montana, Chuck had to drive over. They'd clean toilets at night because, so they were just kind of, their heart and soul were in it. And Mati's generosity working with the teachers at YogaWorks was phenomenal. She would either do what she did with Chris, which she did with Brian Kest and a few other people, for various reasons.
And I was so minded. It was really nothing. So.
Well, it was an interesting time, though, in the early days at YogaWorks, because there were a whole bunch of teachers. And it was like one teacher would come in and teach their style, and another teacher would come in and teach their style. And Mati felt that there was no core, and she wanted to have some kind of a core community. And so gradually she kind of pared it down that way. And then when Sacred Movement opened, there was a party that kind of went with Sacred Movement. And then YogaWorks really became this kind of synthesis of Iyengar and Ashtanga, and Jasmine's work, of course, was, and then Sean. And so they sold to AskG's, and
It was after 15 years, right?
87, so it was in the early 200s, I forget the exact date. And the very first teachers meeting, so the new owners were going to come in and introduce themselves to the teachers, 30 teachers. They come in and they start getting, this is in like 22 or something, They have this big screen and they start giving us a PowerPoint with all these charts of where they're going and what they're going to do, and we're just going, profit, and it's like, what are you talking about? And it was a very sensitive time. They lasted 2 years, and they realized that they needed to bring somebody else in to keep the culture at YogaWorks cohesive. And the person they brought in, as far as I'm concerned, was one of the most important people. behind the scenes that a lot of us don't see, and that was the general manager, Phil Swain. And with, of course, it's now owned by a corporation, and the corporation is accountable to the shareholders, and the corporation has to make a profit. So they did have a mandate to expand. And when Phil first met with some of the core teachers, and I was one of them, and he said, well, we're going to open 13 new studios. And of course I'm going, it takes a while to grow a culture. It takes a while to, it's not like a college course, And he turned to me and said, I respect the yoga process and the path, and we're going to do this together. And very systematically, they moved into New York, and along with Alan Finger, opened 5 yoga works in New York. And it was not an imposition of the yoga works method, because there was at that point already a yoga works method, but there was a discussion. I flew over, another teacher, Julie Kleinman at the time, flew over and discussed with Alan Fingers kind of the New York culture and their point of view and their perspective on yoga, which included more of chakra work and things like that. And there was a discussion, a meeting of the hearts, so to speak. And then that was the next great evolution of kind of the yoga works method. Now, and things changed. Alan Finger left, or was bought out, but we had incorporated a lot of the material that the yoga works method really lacked, which was the subtle body material. And I was very insistent on including meditation and the contemplative side to it and the philosophy. And so then,
it's 1:30.
Oh, I forgot to wear my watch. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to speed forward.
And you had developed the curriculum that was training the teachers to
Yeah.
staff these 13
Yeah,
centers.
Yeah, well, Mati and I created it together. I'm a Capricorn. I'm really good at structure, so I did a lot of that backbone work. And when Mati left, what I wanted, because I believe in collaboration, and so I had a group that I was able to work with, and we collaboratively expanded the teacher training program. We brought in anatomy. There was someone in New York who brought in anatomy. We brought in a prenatal component to it. And it grew, and then the teacher training program and the development of the curriculum was well funded. It was like the business arms that needed to buy studios respected and didn't invade on the intellectual property, let's say, on the yoga teachers who were developing the teacher training program. They gave us they did all the back end work, so this is our content, you do the formatting. And so they really enabled us to grow. And it became just more and more a collaborative process, which was very, very exciting. We now have, I'm no longer involved. I had to make a very conscientious decision. I was walking, full disclosure, I was walking a tightrope for many, many years, because as a certified Iyengar yoga teacher, I'm not allowed to do anything other than Iyengar yoga. And while I taught Iyengar yoga exclusively, when I was teaching in the teacher training program, I taught Iyengar yoga. I now teach in the 500-hour program. I teach the restorative yoga and yoga for chronic injuries. I teach that module. But I had to make a conscious decision to no longer be part of developing the curriculum, and shift my allegiance to Iyengar yoga. The team that now supports the teacher training we're in a little bit of a limbo because the business was sold again 3 years ago. I'm not involved, there was a change in leadership, and I'm frankly not sure where it's going.
How many are there now?
I don't even know. There's a lot. There's a lot. The teacher training program thrives, and the content is good, and it's offered all over the world. Teachers go to Europe and Thailand and Tokyo and Beijing and represent our teacher training program all over the world. So the teacher training manual has been translated into 10 or 12 languages. So that perseveres.
They do a 200 and a 300, so
Yeah.
that the teachers are 500 hours certified.
Well, the certification is separate. Just because you complete, and we were very clear on that right from the beginning, just because you complete the 500 hours doesn't mean that you are certified. It just means that you've completed the material. No, you have to show competency in order to represent the YogaWorks name. I used to wear two hats, but when I was wearing that hat. So there's a formal certification process in the YogaWorks system that includes, again, I'm not a part of it, I haven't been for about 10 years, but you have to teach in front of a panel of teachers with volunteer students and show that you understand the language, the YogaWorks language, that you can make modifications as necessary to your students, and that you can take care of your students. And you have to be certified in the YogaWorks method to be a part of the teacher training program. The Iyengar system has a very formal certification process. We have a national association, we have regional associations, we have a nonprofit institute here in Los Angeles, and our certification process is as objective as it could possibly be. I have been certified, or I've been an assessor for over 20 years. I just chaired an assessment in Austin, Texas. We generally have 12 candidates. We have an introductory level. In the junior intermediate level, there's level 1, 2, and 3. So there's an introductory level certificate, a junior intermediate level certificate, a senior intermediate level certificate, level 1, 2, and 3, junior advanced, and senior advanced. And it's really clear the difference between an introductory teacher, a junior intermediate level 3, a junior advanced. It's really like day and night. And the certification process, they have a written exam, a demonstrated practice. So we have to see that they can practice the poses on the syllabus. There's a syllabus for each one of those levels. And then they teach a group of volunteer students. And it's really an initiation. So what I'd love to encourage you to do is, in fact, if you're available on December 1st, Saturday, December 1st, at the Iyengar Yoga Institute, we're going to show a film. This is in honor of what would have been Guruji's 100th birthday. So this whole year has been the centennial celebration. So on December 1st, we're going to show a film called Atma Darshana. And I had never seen it. It's made by a local filmmaker, and the filmmaker will be there, interviews with Guruji and with the Iyengar family. It's 45 minutes, it's not too long.
What time of day?
It's from 6 to 8. Okay. And then in addition to that, more stories. We're going to have a display leading up to the evening of personal letters. So some of us who have personal letters from Guruji, we'll have those on display, or pictures. And then those of us, like the stories I told here, we'll tell the story that relates to the letter in the, or in the case of Corinne Paulman, for instance. She's a teacher who, when she was very young, she had to have her chest wired together. And Guruji worked a lot with her, so she's going to tell her story. So December 1st, 6 to 8. If you've never been to the Institute, it would kind of be an auspicious, a really cool time to come. And I'll put you on my Pranayama email list.
Yes, please.
Maybe Chris could, I don't know if everybody's on here. I think there was.
No, I don't think so. So let me know, and then I'll forward it on to Lisa.
I teach pranayama on the new and the full moon at the Montana Yoga Works from 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning.
That's lovely.
Yeah, it's special. It's special. My husband needs the car. Any questions?
I have a quick question. In Iyengar's book, he practices Nadi Shodhana with Ujjayi. And Ramaswamy doesn't do it that way. They came from the same Krishnamacharya. And I wondered, is that his way, or did he learn that from Krishnamacharya and maybe Ramaswamy just doesn't do it that way? Or?
There's two parts to the answer to that question, and it's a very pertinent question. Ramaswamy studied with Krishnamacharya at a different time of life than when Pattabhi Joy studied. And so while they each studied with the same teacher, they studied with Krishnamacharya at a different phase in his own exploration of yoga. Somebody who studied with Iyengar when Iyengar was teaching in his 60s, was a very different experience than when he was teaching in his 80s. So that's one part to your answer. The other part is that Krishnamacharya wouldn't teach Guruji Iyengar Pranayama. So this is what Iyengar said. So what Iyengar did is he would watch. He would sneak around and he'd watch him practice. And then everything that he has cultivated with his, and he has a book, Light on Pranayama, that's very extensive.
It's a great book.
Yeah. Everything that he's developed in that, he's developed through his own practice.
I see, okay. Thank you. I've been looking for that answer for 3 years now.
Oh my, okay.
Wow.
Okay, well, you are so lucky to have this sangha, to have this group, and to have. Chris, you did it, I tell you. It happened.
They showed up. So.
Well, I mean the program and everything.
Yeah.
Well, you now have direct access to a very important resource.
Yeah, come to the pranayama classes because they're really. I just started a 3-week pranayama course at the Institute, which I'll probably repeat again next fall or something. Starting with an introduction. And the thing with Iyengar and pranayama is, what he says is that we're working directly with the subtle body with pranayama. So the implications, of how you start are so important, because, like the Yoga Pradipika says, it's like taming wild tigers, and you want to make sure that that you start in a very gentle way, and it's an incredibly profound practice. Well, thank you all. And
Is it your first time here?
yeah.
Do you have time for a quick